Hello all. Today we shall discuss the 6 questions that were asked in this year's UPSC mains exam GS1 from history syllabus. For last many years, UPSC has been asking 6 questions out of 20 that come from history and art and culture together. But if you look at the questions closely, what we get to know is that the proportion of art and culture vis-a-vis modern has been varying. There was an year, couple of years ago, they asked 4 questions from modern India and 2 from culture. This year it is reversed. We have next year it was reversed. We had 2 from modern India, 4 from culture, and now it is balanced, 3 versus 3. So the proportion of culture versus modern keeps on changing. That is our first takeaway. Second point is that the questions themselves are very interesting. You do not need a lot of facts. You do not need to mug up your spectrum or any culture book. What you need to be a thinking creature. And I will tell you how to approach those questions one by one when you look at them here. Let us look at the questions first without going into further analysis. The analysis will come by through the questions one by one. Question 1. How will you explain that medieval Indian temple sculptures represent the social life of those days? It is a very interesting question because we have not thought of it. First of all, it is temple sculpture. It is not about temple. It is not about how the temple used to function as an institution. It is also not about temple architecture. It is purely about temple sculpture. Secondly, it is from the medieval era. When we think of sculptures, we think of maybe Indus Valley sculptures, Ashokan capitals. We think of Gandhar, Mathura, Amravati, or even Sarnath Buddha in Gupta era, but we do not think of the sculptures from the medieval era, especially early medieval and high medieval, late medieval, that entire span from 750 onwards. So we have to bore in mind very fixedly, very appropriately, what is the question asking about. We have to talk about the medieval temple sculptures and not only describe them, we have to get out the social facts of that era, whatever are visible and whatever might not be visible also. So how to talk about this question? The first point I want to discuss is that there is no one single most appropriate way of approaching these questions. It is not a science, it is a craft, and a craft can be delivered in multiple ways. So what I will do through these questions discussion is that I will try to open up your mind to multiple possibilities of rearranging, restructuring, introducing, concluding the same questions and answers. Let us look at this question. The moment to look at this question, there are 2 types of responses that you get from students. First response is that, okay, what are the facts I know? Fact number 1, fact number 2, fact number 3, fact number 4. These are the 4 relevant facts I can recall from my mind. I can recollect them. Let me arrange them in some structure and come to the answer. That is one approach, from data to analysis. Sometimes there is other way approach. Looking at the question, I can divide the question into multiple parts, and for each relevant dimension, each relevant part, what are the facts I can recall? So I have a specific demand to recall the fact from my mind. The both approaches are fine. Both of them have their own limitations and both of them have their own usages. Here, if I go with the second approach for a moment, I can think of a few different structures of the same body. First is, I can divide the temple sculpture into multiple parts. What kind of temple sculpture? Temple sculpture is not always in the Garbha Griha or Sanctum Sanctorium. It is on the outside of the temple. It is temple walls. It is in the subsidiary shrines everywhere. Location is different. The type of sculpture is also different. Temple sculpture does not necessarily mean it is always the sculpture of the main deity. It could be anything. So if I divide as per that, I get deity sculptures, I get mythological narratives, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranic stories. I have saints like Alavar, Nayanar and other sculptures. I also have kings and sometimes queens also, common people and flora and fauna. So I can structure my body with these 5 subheadings and try to show some social fact. That is one way. Other way could be region-wise temple examples. So I can think of temples from North India to Deccan to South India, or vice versa. And I take temple by temple and I show some social relevance, social fact of the contemporary era. This is the other way of structuring the same data that you can think of. The third way, which I think personally is the most appropriate way, is to think of social dimensions first. What kind of social information you are seeking and how it is available in the temple culture that you can think of. Religion, kingship, sects, women, caste, class, family, social values, communities, whatever information you can gather about this, if this becomes your subsections or subheadings, then it becomes a more appropriate structure. That is my personal belief, but other structures are equally valid. If you go by a very Shastric way, in Shastras, the temple sculptures are divided in their own way, sometimes based on their positions, Sthanaka, Asana, Vahana, Shayana. We don't know that. Nobody would teach that, nobody would know that. So I generally don't agree with that you cannot follow it. You have also different type of expressions, yogic, bhogic, rajasa, etc. And from that also you can derive some expression, some information about social reality. But again, it will be too much to expect from a student who is unprepared to that level to think of this in 2 minutes and start writing answers. So I think the most students would have gone for region-wise temple complexes, or some of them would have gone for social dimensions. The more appropriate way would be social dimension, but both of them are equally okay. Now, I have gone from social dimension here and I have collected some examples. It took me almost 15, 17, 20 minutes to think of all these examples, and that also in my own study room. So I know that it is not possible to write all these answers, all these points. There is word limit, there is time pressure, exam hall. But even if you are able to do 30% of it, it is more than adequate. You are far ahead of your contemporaries or colleagues. Let us take various gods. For example, Jagannath temple. The moment I think of Jagannath temple, I know that Jagannath temple was originally, the deity was a tribal deity, and later on it got incorporated into Puranic culture. So it is Aryanization of tribes. It's a social process that is happening. Similarly, if you go to South India, we have multiple hero stones, Veeragad, Chaya Stambha, and those hero stones indicate local culture, local social fact that people have to fight, have to die, have to defend villages, have to attack, all those things. And they are remembered as heroes. So those local heroes who are remembered, who have died for villages, later on became part of temple complexes, temple sculpture. So these two things tell me that originally what was folk, what was tribal, what was local, later on got accepted into something called as main tradition. So little tradition and great tradition interaction can be very well seen in temples. This is how the communities socially evolve. One example. The second dimension is sects. I can see all the dimensions of sectarianism, either rivalry and competition, or even coming together and synthesizing and harmonizing. If I look at different temples or temple sculptures, like where the murtis, the sculpture is located. Now we all study that in Gupta era we have Panchayatan temples. In Panchayatan temples we have a central shrine. It's given in NCERT as well, and we have 4 subsidiary shrines. What does it mean? It means that all the 5 deities are puja, are worthy of worship and devotion, but there is a hierarchy amongst them. The one who is sitting in the central Garbhagriha is given more primacy than the 4 who are in the 4 corners. And each deity originally was a deity of different community, and all these communities now have come together. So there is a hierarchy amongst them. Some communities are more prominent. Their values, their gods, their social systems are now overbearing over other communities who are getting assimilated. So you have to see this inequality and hierarchy based on the location of different murtis. If you go to Konark, a UNESCO World Heritage Site on the eastern coast of India, in Konark, you have at the entry of temple a huge lion who is pouncing over an elephant. Now, it can be interpreted in a very historic manner. An elephant represents Buddhism, lion represents other religion, and now the region which was under influence of one religion is getting transition into other religion. So religious change in a society. You also have in South India, Chola. Now, Cholas were primarily Shaiva. And if you go to Vijayanagara, a few hundred years later, the later half of Vijayanagara kings are primarily Vaishnava. So the transition you can see in same region, even within Vijayanagara also, the first few kings are more Vaishnava than Shaiva. There is always a tension. And the later Vijayanagara kings from Krishnadevaraya onwards, they are primarily Vaishnava than Shaiva. So change in sectarian affiliation of the king and the society. So initial decades we have Virupaksha, later decades we have Vitthala Swami, we have Tirupati, who become more important. Now, not only this kind of tension or rivalry or change, you also have attempts of harmonization between different sects. If you go to Kailas temple in Ellora, the one built by Rashtrakutas, at the very entry you have left hand gallery and right hand gallery, and in these two galleries you have on one side Shaiva sculptures, on the other side Vaishnava sculptures. So in the same temple we have given place to Shaivism and Vaishnavism to show that they are all important, don't fight. You also have a very famous murti of Hari Hara that comes from the Chalukyan domain. Hari Hara. What is Hari and Hara? Hari Hara. Vaishnavism, Shaivism. It is half Hari, half Hara. So two sects are combined. So such kind of attempts of bringing harmony and symphony between sectarianism also is there. You go to third thing. History is obsessed with the study of legitimacy. So royal legitimacy. When you have Alavars and Nainars saints who were peripatetic saints going from town to town in early era, in the Pallava era, a few hundred years later when Cholas come, Cholas, they create the sculptures of these Alavar Nainars saints and put them in temples, either in stone or in bronze, primarily in bronze. Why? Because the saints are very popular in society, and by enshrining them in the temples, the king's acceptability increases. You also have a very famous Chandesha sculpture where the Chola king gets anugraha by Shiva. Now, king and Shiva connected, people should accept him. You also have Krishna Devaraya and his two wives and their beautiful bronze sculpture donated to Tirupati. So we have one example you can give of royal legitimacy establishing in society, that is good enough. We have family values and ethics trying to be imbibed and inculcated in society with the help of narrative panels and stories of mythologies. For example, you have Bhakta Prahlad on many temples, Shravan Bal on many temples. They try to tell you some value system. The function of religion in society is intermediated with the help of sculptures on representation, sculptures on display. So what religion wants to achieve in society can be done through multiple ways: singing, music, painting, and also sculpture. So giving social values, family values, ethical values in society is one or was one part of religion in the medieval times. And that happens through sculptures of various stories. You also go to women's condition. You have, for example, if you go to Bengal side, in the early medieval, Tantricism had become very popular, and you can see the influence of Tantricism on temple sculptures, various goddesses. In Tantric culture, the woman is having as much importance as man. Without the union of the energies of both sides, we cannot have liberation. So in Tantric cults, on the temple sculptures, we have the profuse representation of goddesses. So it is in medieval, especially early medieval onwards, number of goddesses that appear on temple sculptures in all parts of India, and more so in the eastern part of India, increase in frequency. You have then attitude towards sexuality. It is a very important thing. Nowadays, LGBTQ, IAS, YZ debates are going on. So you have attitude towards sexuality, Ardhanarishwar. You have Shiva and Parvati, yin and yang in the same place, half man, half woman. If you go to Konark, If you go to Khajuraho, if you even go to Modhera Ka Surya Mandir in Gujarat, you find lot of erotic sculptures of men and women, and even beasts. So those erotic sculptures, technically we call them Mithun sculptures, and they also give us a hint of medieval Indian society, if not all people, at least of some people, towards sexuality, the value system that is long gone after the colonial Victorian age. Then you go to performing arts, dance and music, you have innumerable examples. I'll just read out one example. If you go to Tanjore, in the temple of Brihadeshwara, or if you go to Chidambaram, in both these temples, you have various positions, Karana mudras of dance postures, and they are somehow associated with Devadasi culture. So dance and music, you have a lot of examples. You go to caste system. Now you have in South India a tradition, not in South India, in many parts of India, a tradition of two murtis in a god. We have main murti which is immovable, that cannot be moved. And there is other murti which is portable, movable. So whenever there is annual festival or celebration, this movable murti, which is called as Utsava murti, that comes out of temple, that goes into various parts and come back. It gives darshan to all the people, even to those people who otherwise could not enter the temple. You see the caste system coming into play. Daily life events. This is a very important aspect. If you don't write sometimes even other aspect, that is fine, but this is a very obvious and very important aspect. How the Kesha Bhusha, headgear is, what are the ornaments, what are the clothes, what are the makeup, all these things are very well visible into various murtis across centuries. Rather, I have even seen an attempt by a person, artist actually, who tracked the change in the representation of female body over 2000 years, and he came up with the idea that how the clothes in India have evolved, how the makeup has evolved, how the ornaments have evolved, and something has changed, some has not changed. So these are again daily life exhibition of your aesthetics. They also are about society. Sometimes you have a lot of animals which are shown, or even birds. From Shukra Saptati, for example, you would have a parapet with a woman. So a lot of birds and animals who are shown in close proximity with humans in sculptures, that shows the relationship between man and nature. And then you have, if you go to Bengal in NCRT, there is a very fine photo of a sculptural panel of terracotta in Bengali temple, where a man is going through the river in the boat or in the ship. Now in Bengal, river channels are so many. Shipping and boat culture is very common. So what is common gets reflected in religion also. You have interaction with foreigners. If you go to Konark temple, in Konark you have a sculpture of giraffe. It's a very interesting photo. I had shared that photo in my Telegram channel, I think last year. Now India naturally is not a habitat of giraffe, but 1000 years ago giraffe is shown on a temple sculpture on eastern India, because the Kalinga people are in constant trade relationship with Africa. So African merchants come to Kalinga, Kalingan merchants go to other parts of India. So such kind of trade, social community interaction can be seen. And you have in South India many temples that depict Chinese people. For example, Yuan Sang is depicted on a sculpture in South India. That again shows the acceptability of something called as foreign into something called as sacred. So these are, maybe I am using some difficult terms, but I think you get the concept. If you can write at least some of this, your answer would become beautiful. However, these are all facts. What I can do is, generally, you find such examples, then you can arrange them into woman condition, caste, etc., sexuality, and give some examples. It makes a perfect answer. But the purpose of this discussion is to go beyond mere facts and the arrangement of facts and try to deduce something which may be useful for your preparation next year also. So I have brought some critical approaches. Now, this is what makes you a thinking creature, and if you are able to incorporate these views, either of these, not all of them, at least one, either in the introduction or in the body or in conclusion, suitable as per your answer narrative. That shows that you are going to go beyond fact. Now, many toppers would say that you have to add more facts, more dimensions. It's a competition of adding more dimensions. It is true. Unfortunately or fortunately, the general studies paper is a competition of adding as many dimensions and facts as possible, but that is not the only way. It may be necessary but not sufficient. You have to show that you have some perspective as well. And for that, for example, ask the very fundamental question to the question itself. Why is the question important? When you see that you have on one side religious temple sculpture and on the other side you have society, what is the relation between the two, religion and society? Generally the fundamental aspect of religion is metaphysical, and but in india as I said, Indian approach towards religion is not only metaphysical, it is not disconnected from social reality but a reflection of society itself. We see divine in everything around us, so the temple sculptures also end up reflecting our society. Now this can be, or some kind of paraphrasing of this can be introduction or conclusion. What is not seen in sculpture? This can be your critical viewpoint also, like the condition of untouchables. It is social reality which does not get reflected into temple sculpture. Not all society can be seen. What is not seen is also a fact. And sometimes what is seen is not directly correlated, sometimes inversely correlated. A very famous historian Upinder Singh has published a book recently, A Culture of Contradictions. In that she has a chapter on this, that on one side we have divine femininity, feminine divinity, and on the other hand we have patriarchy also, and both these contradictions exist together at the same time. So when we say that in early medieval era, female divinity increase, the sculptures of goddesses increase in number, what does it indicate about society? Was there better accommodation of genders? Was there relatively more equality among genders? Well, it is sometimes, not sometimes, actually it is opposite. The more goddesses you see in the temples, there is a possibility of increasing patriarchy in society, and that had happened in the early medieval era. From the 8th 9th century to 12th 13th century, you see increasing patriarchy, increasing control over gender, at the same time increasing number of goddesses appearing on the temples. So these views also you can add. One of these views is good enough to show you that, to show the examiner that you are a thinking creature. Anyway, let us go to the next question. Why did the armies of the British East India Company, mostly comprising of Indian soldiers, win consistently against the more numerous and better equipped armies of the then Indian rulers? Give reasons. Now, I am myself not very convinced of the question, because I have not seen that Indians were better equipped in armies. But let us assume it as a matter of fact, because it is given in the question. We can't question the question beyond a point. Now, how to introduce this answer? Now, this question is actually a very typical question of history. Outwardly, it appears that it is about military history. There are two different set of armies standing in front of each other with their own characteristic. One wins over other despite some odds. Why? But actually the question goes beyond the military history. Your answer in the main body should be divided into two equal halves. The first half should enlist the military characteristics: organization, leadership, generalship, paying, training, drill, equipment, artillery, whatever. They are in logistics, strategy. In the second half, you go beyond the battlefield and talk of other factors which are non-military. Let us see all of them, but how to introduce? Now, Indians had upper hand during Mughals, but by the 18th century, because of the fragmented polity, India was divided into multiple political units independently. So it was easier for British to finish them one by one. Other way could be conquest of India was not only a military victory, but a victory of modern time over medieval time. It is here you give a hint It is not only military factors but also non-military factors. What if we had won one war here and there? Ultimately, after a few years, we would have lost anyway. It is not about winning this war or that war. It is about the process and structure which is in long term. So let us look at the main body. Firstly, we discuss about the military and strategic factors only. A typical factor that come in your mind: British Army, the British Indian Army was better trained, better disciplined. It was drilled, practiced, regimented. We have hierarchy. We have organization which is better. We have better weapons. But this point can be avoided because question tells you otherwise. We have better generalship, leadership. You can give examples of all of this. We have good espionage system. British used to know what is there inside the Tipu's camp or Marathas camp before attacking. Better espionage. Strategy as well as logistics. So in South Indian wars, the naval supremacy was very helpful for British to compensate their limitations on land sometimes. And same thing happened also in Plassey. So you have some naval supremacy. So these are all the military factors. And associated strategic factors are diplomacy. In diplomacy, for example, Plassey, it was won even before the battle began. It is how you do some kind of diplomatic efforts. You also have ensure that all the enemies do not come together at the same time. In Deccan, for example, Tipu's, Nizam, and Marathas. Three were very formidable powers. These three never came together for a long time to defeat British. British always ensured there is fight amongst these three, and they took one as an enemy and two on their own side, formed a coalition, defeated them one by one. Nizam was gone, Tipu was gone, then Marathas were gone. So that is how you have to use diplomacy. When you are weak, you ensure that there is no unity in the enemy camp. Subsidiary alliance ensured British could throw their power in various parts of India with the least of efforts. And defensive aggression. British always ensured that they portray that they are the victims, they are not the aggressors. They had entire logic, propaganda, legitimacy creating mechanism to ensure that they are the victims, so they have to be aggressors. There is no other choice. And that legitimacy helped them a lot in gathering resources, public opinion, support, and everything. At the same time, if these are the strengths of British rulers or British army and their leaders, these are also the weaknesses of Indian side. So we have Indian rulers who are running on primarily peasant armies. It is not well trained. Now some units may be standing army, but not entire army was standing. The payment issues were always there. British used to be extremely good paymasters. And attempts of modernization, I could see three major attempts on the Indian side to modernize their army in light of European development. The most famous one is Tipu Sultan and Hyder with the help of French. The second one is by Mahatma Sindhi. He also got many French to train his army and use artillery. And the third one is Maharaja Ranjit Singh. His Topkhana Pili, Topkhana Gavi, and other artillery on one side and regimentation training on the other side. So these three major attempts are there, but these three attempts were unsuccessful in the long run because you cannot modernize only army devoid of entire socio-economic modernization. So that is a structural limit. Now there is other way to structure the same answer, which is less probable but equally valid. I am a student of history, so I trace things chronologically. Let us see them. There are four major regions: Bengal, Mysore, Maratha, and Punjab. The story of conquest of India by British from 1750s to 1850s is primarily conquest of these four major regions. So we also study Plassey and Buxar, Bengal. Then we study Anglo-Mysore wars. Then we study Anglo-Maratha wars. Just a moment. Read mode. Yeah. And then we study Punjab, Anglo-Sikh wars, two Anglo-Sikh wars. Now, if you take examples from each of them, and through the examples, if you can show how British were sometimes on the weaker side, on the weaker footing, and still were able to succeed in the long run, That makes a perfectly fine answer. Let us see. Bengal. Now, Plassey was a diplomatic win, but in Buxar, despite having a smaller army, and even in that smaller army, there is a defection of a larger contingent on the battlefield from the British towards India. And they're fighting against the coalition of three major people on Indian side. Still, they were able to win. So we have, because of the discipline of the European arms and trained soldiers. We have Mysore. Now, Mysore was strong militarily, but through the process of 2 decades, gradually they crippled Mysore one by one by starving them of sources, by taking away the coastal regions, by defeating them in small war here and there, ensuring the coalition against Mysore. So these are all other things that are done to subdue Mysore. Again, despite the limitations of arms. You also have Marathas. In the first Anglo-Maratha war, it was almost a tie. British were not very much powerful than Marathas. Then they took 20 years of peace to recuperate themselves, and they waited and waited and waited to see the Marathas are internally weak. And when the opportunity came, they pounced upon it. Again, a strategic vision. If you look at the Battle of Asai, in the Battle of Asai, British used Madras regiment against Marathas. The very famous story of running away with the elephant of Marathas. A very short army was routed. A very short army of British completely routed a huge Maratha army. You also have Punjab. In Punjab, it requires strategic planning. As far as Maharaja Ranjit Singh was alive, British never dared to attack Punjab, but they ensured that the Sis and Trans Satluj region, the boundary was maintained. They gradually got Sindh, they entered Afghanistan, they encircled Punjab, and when Maharaja was dead, within a decade, Punjab was gobbled up. So we have the strategic vision, long-term vision also. So you can write your answer either in this way. I think the most logical, or most not logical, but most obvious way of students of writing this would be these factors. The second approach is going with the region and the examples. However, to make your answer stand apart and to show the depth, I am giving you a hint of few more points which are so general that you can use them in multiple other answers of similar kind. The first point is disunity and lack of nationalism among Indians. Now, how it manifested in these wars? Soldiers were proud of representing British Empire. So Indian soldiers were proud because they thought it is more prestigious, and such kind of prestige and honor was meticulously cultivated through training and regalia, manifestation of the empire. You see, company successfully tapped into India's military labor market. It's a very technical term. Historians use it. Military labor market. In India, India has always been a source of human capital for the world, even today. Take, for example, the Rajputs. Now, when Rajputs were prominent across North India, they used to fight. A lot of soldiers were there. The one who was able to garner more resources to recruit more soldiers was more successful. It is what Akbar did. Akbar did not create something, he just tapped successfully by creating attractive packages for getting more Rajputs on his side. Even today, we have the same thing. You go to IT companies, we have many IT labor, the IT engineers, coolies, we call them sometimes derogatorily. So sometimes they go to Infosys, sometimes Cognizant, sometimes Cummins, doesn't matter. Everybody benefits. The one who can give better package, they go there. It is a labor market. If you go to 17th century Deccan, you have multiple sultanates, Bijapur, Golconda, and all of them. Up they were fighting, all of them, for almost a century, and they created a military labor market in Deccan. So when Marathas arose, they were, with the help of not resources in this context, but with the help of some fellow feeling and some larger cause, they were able to collect all these labor market Marathas together and create a feeling of unity and a formidable force against Mughals in long term. The same thing you can say here. Military labor, but British were able to give prestige, better payment, and other things and therefore they were able to attract more labor on their side, military labor in the long run. So successfully tapping into military labor market, it's a very, you don't have to write all of these things. Just understand that in The Anarchy, William Dalrymple has given details of how it was done. But anyway, then Indian kings also never came together. It was a dream of Nana Fadnvis. By 1799, 1800, he was dead, but he had at least attempted to create a coalition of all Indian powers against British, and that was the thing British were very well afraid of. Through the active diplomacy, they ensured that all Indian princes do not come together. And they never did, because they lacked strategic vision and unity, because they lacked nationalism to that extent. You also have the use of internal cleavages. Mahar regiment was used against Peshwas. The southern people were used against North Indians, one community against other community, martial races, all these things were created. Apart from that, we have financial management. Now, it is not that British were never defeated. There are many battles in which British were defeated. The history of conquest of India is not the history of undefeated battles over a century by British. No. Point is not that they were undefeated. The point is that even after being defeated, they ensured that their defeat is never fatal. They are not eradicated from this land. They come back. And they will keep coming back till the time they are successful. Why? How is it? How was it possible? It was possible basically because they had reserves, they had finances, they had long-term vision, and they had basically financial management. You see, they lost many times but had bandwidth to absorb the losses. They could wait and watch and come back. Long-term strategic vision. They never fought loss-picking wars like Indian kings. On the other hand, Indian kings were not able to garner so much resources. So the success of East India Company is more the success of financial management and organization and strategic vision, and relatively less the success of arms in the battle. So when you say that either way we were going to lose, even if we would have won this war, that war, Plassey or something, even if Plassey was won by Indians, in the long run we are doomed. It's about capitalism model. Even Ottoman and Safavids declined, like the Mughals and others later on. It's not about one large empire or many small states. It is about resources and economic organization. If any state had the potential to become capitalist, dot, dot, dot. I kept the thought incomplete, but you got the hint. It was a fight between two unequals, medieval structure and modern capitalist society. There is no match. It's not only about the military factors on the ground. Now I know I have given you so many factors, you cannot write them in 150 or 250 words, and you are not even expected to write. My contention is only this, that you should not end your answer with only military factors of better payment and better training and better drill, better leadership, better organization. These are all one set of factors. The other set of factors, diplomacy, vision, financial management, and then in the conclusion, you talk about it was an unequal fight between the two different models. That's all. That's all. Go beyond military factors. If you do that, the answer is quite good and well rounded. Let us go to the next question. Why was there a sudden spurt in famines in colonial India since the mid-18th century? Give reasons. It's a very typical and a very standard question. I hope that you have not faced any problem. Those of you who have written the exam. The economic impact of colonization is a very important and very mainstream topic. And one of the major economic impact is the famine. So we generally study the famine policy of British also. In old NCERT, in new NCERT, it is there. In Spectrum, it is there. In Grover, it is there. Many books have that sub-chapter or at least a paragraph or two on this. The most basic book will also carry a paragraph on this. So it is unexpected. It is not a difficult or out of the blue question at all. Here I will try to take you from your basic understanding of famine to a much higher plane, which will again try to convert you into a thinking creature. How to introduce? Now, I thought of some variety of introductions to this question. These are introduction heads, like a general introduction. Millions died due to food shortage, which was an outcome of the deliberate British policy of undermining Indian economy. So these are not natural famines. This is a deliberate British policy. Almost 4 crore people perished during the British rule due to famines, which were caused by British only. That's very simple. You have just added one fact that 4 crore people died. And even if even in absence of that fact, it makes a good introduction, a standard introduction, a very logical and obvious also. Sometimes you can add some historic context. So let me try to give you some historic context to this. Megasthenes had said in India there is no famine. Obviously, he was wrong. But Indian kings before British took care of Indian population. For example, you have Sohuguda inscription. UPSC asked about it in prelims 3 years ago or 4 years ago. Sohuguda copper plate inscription, where you get to see that Ashoka is telling the people that when in the era of in the time of lack of food and grains, the buffer stock should be opened up for the people. Welfare policy of the state. We have Tughlaq, Sher Shah, Akbar, and even Shivaji, etc., giving concessional loans to peasants and farmers in the era of problems. Again, how to come out of famine. You go to Lucknow, you have Bada Imam Bada. It was constructed in 1780s during famine relief operation. The people don't have work, there is famine. Come and construct Imam Bada. You get some wages, you can go and buy some food from the market. So before British, there was an active intervention of Indian kings during famine to provide relief to people. That is one single line. But when British came, not only they devastated Indian economy, they also stopped intervening in society in the name of liberalism, and that exacerbated the problem. That is my thesis line. But anyway, I can introduce in another way. In the first half of 19th century, there were 6 major famines, while in the second half of 19th century, 14 major famines, to which around 3 crore people died. The last famine was 1943, just before British left. You can give such kind of introduction also, a factual introduction. The one I like is this one. British rule started with a famine of 1760s in Bengal, and it ended with a famine of 1940s in Bengal. So the entire colonial rule was a kind of extended famine. Another type of introduction. Let me give you one more example. The incidents of famine were not new to Indian history, but under the British, the incidents of famine multiplied in number. Where climatic and environmental factors were responsible in most of the earlier incidents, under British rule, British policy was responsible for to a large extent. So why sudden spurt? Because of this. Or one single line, a very terse and pithy line. Incidents of famine exposed the true character of British colonialism. They had the boastful claims of being liberal and modernizer and what not. But look at the famines, millions died, they did nothing. That exposes their true character. Somehow you have to bring that debate back to the colonial nature of British state. So you can choose many of these. Now look at the factors, the main body of the answer. Causes. Why? Question is why? So causes. Now in some cases it could be natural causes, lack of monsoon. It's very normal for India in one or other part of India every year there is a monsoon deficit. So a lot of parts of India are perennially famine prone. So that thing goes on. But what happened due to British economic policies? What changed from 1750s and 60s onwards? Here you get this thing. Cash crops cultivation for export. Commercialization of agriculture ensured that the subsistence-based agriculture is no more there. No more food grains are there available easily. So whenever there is some kind of problem, there is a huge problem. A small thing can trigger big consequences if the system is so thinly balanced. Rain-fed agriculture, so any less rain directly resulted in famine because no buffer, no subsistence anymore. Infrastructure priorities. There is a very famous debate amongst Indians at that time, railway versus canal debate. British said, we have finances, we are improving you, we are modernizing you, but where? In railways. Indians said, if you want to give capital to us, at least invest in the things which are helpful for us. Our priorities should be your priorities, and our priority is to get rid of famines. What we need is irrigation and canals. But British are investing their money into primarily railways. Railways are actually helping to drain raw material and food away from India all the more. So that reason is there. High revenue extraction by zamindars impoverished the peasants that decreased their purchasing ability. Diversion for army buffer during World War. So we have this 1943 famous kissa of Maharaja Churchill. Why is not Gandhi dead yet? Millions died in Bengal primarily because Churchill was a pig-headed person. So we have those things also. If you watch that very famous speech of Shashi Tharoor that became famous, I think, a few years ago, the Oxford debate speech, in that he mentions that incident very well. So we have this very important reason, 4 or 5 reasons that makes your perfect answer. There is no problem. But there is another approach of structuring the same points. It is more scientific, more technical in nature. So you might not do it, but it will create a handy structure, handy framework for you in future. Now, generally, if you visit many UN FAO website and other websites of UN, they divide them into two parts. One part is food availability decline, FAD, and other part is reduction of purchasing power. They call it FEE, failure of exchange entitlement. So FAD and P, the two major baskets which are causes of famine. In FAD, what do we have? Food availability decline. Now, why is there less food available? Because of either natural reasons or man-made reasons. Now, monsoon failure, drought, epidemic could be natural reasons. They are constant even before 1750 and after 1750. But other things increase. Agriculture, commercialization, decline in production of coarse grains. We have seen the factor. Railway construction, easier to transport grains to port, export of grains to Britain in large quantities, even during shortage like in 1940s, during World War II. So all these reasons lead to food availability decline, and many of them are caused by active British policies. And there is FEE, failure of exchange entitlement. So in simpler language, purchasing power gets reduced. Why? Because heavy land revenue leads to impoverishment, pauperization. We have collapse of handicraft because of deindustrialization, and therefore decline in the purchasing power. So who has given this argument? This argument is given to us by very famous person, Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen talks about this fact that famines are primarily not due to lack of food in the market, but lack of money in the pocket of the people who want to buy that food. So he focuses more on fee than fad. And why was there less money in the pocket of Indians? Because of the exploitation done by British. And therefore he says the solution is a democracy. Because howsoever may the democracy be, in any or the poorest of democracies also, generally there is no famine. Because there is pressure from public. So the very existence of British colonial undemocratic state is the reason for famines, as per Amartya Sen. You can read, he is a very popular and standard author on this. You can cite him if you know. How to conclude? We had to keep importing even PL 480 in the post-independence era too. In 1950s and 60s, we faced multiple droughts again. Ultimately, it was Green Revolution that brought us out of it. So India becoming independent and democratic nation state, and Green Revolution and other things. That was the final solution. That is how you can finish your answer. Let's go to the next question. Now, these 3 questions were 10 markers. Now we shall discuss 15 markers, 3 more questions. Here we have one from modern India and two from culture part. Interestingly, there is no question from the freedom movement this year. I even read all the questions yesterday and counted them. In the 2013, the new pattern has come. It's been exactly 10 papers now. 10 papers. In the 10 papers, 2013 to 2022, we have around 27 questions from modern India. Of the 27 questions, almost 45% questions are from not Indian freedom movement. 45% questions. You see, we focus a lot from Congress formation till 1947, 1885 to 1947, but 45% questions have not been from that region. They come from before that. So whenever you study modern India, you have to give equal focus on before 1885 and after 1885. Both of them are almost equally important statistically. This year, there has not been a single question from the freedom movement, no Gandhi movement, no revolutionaries, no left, no right, nothing. It is only other factors on which the questions are asked. Let us go on. The political and administrative reorganization of states and territories has been a continuous ongoing process since the mid-18th century, discussed with examples. Now, this question, I have seen some students interpreting it in the context of world history, which may be true because nowhere in the question they have mentioned India. But actually, this should be mid-19th century. It is a spelling error. It is mid-19th century, around 1850s onwards. So if you want to interpret it in the context of world history, you start with the effects of French Revolution onwards, especially territorial reorganization in Central Europe, Germany and Italy, then Balkan, etc. You can do it for world history also. It is okay. But in the world history, we use not the word states and administrative reorganization. We go for nation states and boundary retrieval, etc. So this question is primarily in the context of India. But it is, as they call in Hindi, Adha Titar, Adha Bater, half pre-1947 and half post-1947. So it is not a purely post-independence question. Half of the answer is supposed to come from the pre-1947 era and remaining half from the post-1947 era. That makes the answer holistic. Now look at the introduction hints. Unlike American Constitution, for various reasons, the states in India have historically evolved in a very flexible way, and the ground for their creation has variously been administrative, political, linguistic, popular demand. So the reason, the rationale for the state creation and recreation has changed over time. That is because it has, the question itself asks you that it is a continuous ongoing process. The question is why? Because the basis of such creation has changed over time. Then evolution of modern Indian states is a story of gradual coming into being of various historical cultural regions into political administrative states in the colonial and post-colonial era. These are just two possible hints for introduction. You can have any other introduction, but in introduction, you have to somehow refer to the rationale of such continuous ongoing process. Why it is continuous ongoing process. Now remember well, whenever UPSC asks a question, what? Then we think of examples, dimensions, facts. But always and always, along with what, there is an invisible question of why. Now this why, you have to address somewhere in the answer, either in introduction or in the body or in the conclusion, depending on the question. But writing only why without even touching why, writing only what without even touching why, is an incomplete answer. So here you can try to touch why aspect in introduction itself. You can do it in the body also. Now in this body, you have to divide it into two parts, pre-47 and post-47. I found this question particularly interesting because it's a very typical of UPSC that they would take a question. When you read in the exam hall, you think, ye kya pooch liya bhai? I had never read this anywhere. But when you come out of exam hall, You start collecting facts, and it seems that you knew everything already. It was only the lack of alertness, the promptness that caused the problem in the exam hall. It is one such type of question. The facts that I will count now, you would have known already, all of them. Let us see. First of all, 1850s onwards. So it is trying to say that when the company was gone and the British government took over India, and that point onwards, the process of change is to be written over here. So you have the conversion. From the day they captured power, they started reorganization and consolidation with the primary purpose of increasing colonial control and ensuring administrative ease. So you have the rationale given. After 1850s, we have variety of provinces: chief minister province, lieutenant governor province, regulation province, a lot of terms. You did not know all of this. But what we know is presidencies. Bombay presidency, Madras presidency, Bengal presidency, they were there. And then you have provinces. So the process of conversion of presidencies into provinces starts after 1857 gradually. That is a very important, you know that. For example, we have the creation of Northwest Frontier Province. When we study the Northwest tribal policy of British, we study that. When central provinces and Berar were created in 1903 during the time of Curzon, we know that Berar, despite being a Marathi speaking population, was not attached to Bombay province. It was attached to CP, central province. Why? Because Pune and Bombay people were already very nationalist, and British did not want to add to their power by attaching a province to them. So the divide and rule was already going on even before the Bengal partition of 1905. It is an example given in every other book. We have seen that. Now come to Bengal. Now, Bengal was partitioned in 1905. It was annulled a few years later, but in long run, you see, Assam came out of it. Bihar and Odisha came out of Odisha became the first language-based province in India. So you have these various provinces being created, and presidency is now dissected. You have creation of United Province in 1921. We don't read that much, it's okay. But Sindh came out of Bombay, that all of us read when we study 1935 Act, right? So you have this. Outside India also, Myanmar, Aden, Afghanistan, Bhutan, these regions became part of the British Indian administration at some point of time, and then they were gone. So it is always going on, coming together, going apart, reorganization of administration. The other major half of the first part of the answer is the reorganization of princely states. We have initially residencies and various agencies: Rajputana Agency, East India Agency, Punjab Agency, Central India agencies created. In agency, you have multiple princely states. They are clubbed together, and then they are represented by British. And then you have federal arrangement, attempted federal arrangement in the Act of 1935. Again, administrative reorganization. So I am sure that most of you already knew most of these facts, but you were not able to collect them in the context of this question. That is the skill that we have to earn by practice. Random recall. In the second half of the answer, post 1947, this part I have no problem. You also have no problem. It is the most standard part of the answer. We study that every year. So about 500 plus princely states, they were integrated. You have the A, B, C, D, 4 category of states initially. Then we have people's protest and creation of linguistic provinces. The rationale, the basis of state creation has changed. Then you have French and Portuguese territories coming into India later on. We also have in the post-Nehruvian era, we have Pepsu being divided into Punjab, Himachal, and Haryana. The Chandigarh dispute still goes on. We have Northeast India, which was only one single province earlier. Various UTs were created, and gradually UTs got converted into full-fledged states. A concession given because of cultural specificities of some communities. And we have 3 smaller states that came into existence during the Vajpayee era. A conclusion, you can give variety of conclusions. Its numbers went on increasing. Initially 14 states, and now we have 28 states plus 8 UTs. It is an unending dynamic process. That is what the question says. Indian Constitution is a dynamic document. Article 2, Article 3, flexibility. You can connect it with the polity also. If possible, you can connect it with growing regional aspirations. That is also a valid type of conclusion, the basis of state formation. And you can bring it to the creation of Jammu Kashmir, UT, 370 abolition. It is still ongoing. It will become a state in some days or some months or years. So you have these different possible conclusions. But here the point is, in the first half of the body, you should be able to highlight at least one or two examples of states and just mention the princely states were also continuously reorganized. That is good enough. Good enough. Go to the next question. Discuss the main contributions of Gupta period and Chola period to Indian heritage and culture. Now here I have to give you warning. I discussed this question with a few students and they are trying to go mechanistically for this question and next question also, which I will tell in some time. Mechanistically, we divide the answer into parts, subdivide, take various keywords and make sub-part. It is true. It is true that we have to take the keywords, we have to divide the main body into parts, but it has to be logical and organic. It cannot be unthoughtful. For example, in this question, I cannot go for two different parts, one heritage and one culture. It will be absurd because we cannot do that. You can go the other way. You can divide the main body into Gupta and Chola, two parts, and answer, which is perfectly fine. Which is perfectly fine. Now, introduction. Again, different variety of introductions. Let us see one introduction, simple introduction. Just briefly introduce basics of the two cultures, that Gupta came from this century to that century in North India, Chola from this to that century in South India, and both are important, simple, or high water marks. Introduce heritage and culture. Now, you see, this question is interesting because it gives you a very nice idea of the dipole of keywords. Here you have Chola Gupta as one keyword and heritage culture as other keyword. So both these keywords are important and question is about their relationship, but which one is the primary keyword? If you think Chola and Gupta are primary keywords, then introduce them. But some students may think other way around also. They can introduce the idea of heritage and make heritage culture as the primary keyword, and as an example, illustration, substantiation, you have Chola and Gupta. That is also equally fine. So introduce the idea of heritage and culture, that it evolved through many phases, and Gupta and Chola were high points. It is perfectly fine of introducing. Then you have to ask you other question, which I think you should have done because it is a very basic thing. When you have Gupta and Chola combined together, they are combined together. Why? There have been a question in the past in GS on Gupta numismatics, and there have also been a question, I guess in 2013, on the Chola architecture being the high water mark. So UPSC has already asked two standalone questions, especially in Chola architecture only and Gupta coins only, and now they want you to write entire Gupta and Chola heritage club together into one answer. It is a very difficult task to do, not because you don't have data, but because specifically you have too much of a data in this context. It is not easy to make it concise, find the essence and write into 250 words. It is equally a challenge. Any which way, you look at the question and ask yourself, why have they clubbed Chola and Gupta together? Because both of them are deemed as golden ages. So you can talk of golden age of India. In North India, Gupta; in South India, Chola. That is the thing that is common to both of them. They are also called as classical ages. What is classical age? Classical age means classical golden age and classical age are two connected but different things. Golden age is about the all-round achievement in every sphere of life: political, administrative, cultural, social, economic, everything, religious as well. And classical age is one specific aspect of golden age, which is about only and only culture and heritage. So there is a dispute whether Gupta or Chola are golden ages or not. But there is no dispute. Everybody agrees that Gupta and Chola both are classical ages at least. So what is this classical age? Classical age means you create the very high achievement in all the cultural arena of arts and culture and literature. Not only there is very high achievement, that is first point, you also inspire future generations by creating benchmarks, that this is how is the highest quality defined. So anybody writing drama afterwards would say this drama is as good as the drama written by Kalidas. Kalidas has become a benchmark, a standard. So it is a very high achievement, and it inspires future generations. So that is classical. So you can introduce a factual way, the reverse way, the golden age way, or classical age way. It is all fine. All of these four are valid introductions. My guess and understanding is that in the class you can discuss all these four. In the exam hall you can come up with any one, which is fine. In the main body, how to arrange? That is a major problem of this question. Most people would go for first half of the answer Gupta, second half of the answer Chola, which is fine, but it will be very lengthy, cumbersome, and difficult to finish. The same data can also be rearranged into a tabular format where you have Gupta Empire and Chola Empire, and here we have different aspects of culture and heritage. We have architecture, sculpture, science and tech, literature, and religion, education as well. The examples I do not need to read all of them, just idea. Architecture, Gupta is the beginning of Nagar style. Beginning of Nagar style. Also, Ajanta and Udaygiri caves come from Gupta era. Ajanta does not come from Gupta Empire, but it represents Gupta era. Chola is the very peak of the Dravida style of architecture, and you have some UNESCO World Heritage sites in Chola. Sculpture, you have the most beautiful Buddha sculpture ever, that is Sarnath Buddha, that comes from Gupta era. Here you have Nataraja, the highest refinement of Indian philosophical and technical art. You have science and tech, metallurgy, gold coins, dinars, iron pillars, Aryabhatta, Varahamir, Sushrut, all of them come from Gupta era. Here we have lost wax, wood steel also. Again, science and tech achievement. Literature, Kalidas, Amar Simha, all of them. And here you have Kambar, etc. One of the highest watermarks of Tamil literature, Kambar Ramayana and other things. You have religion. Gupta era is an era where Puranic Hinduism came into being. Today, what we call as Hinduism is a product of Gupta Empire, the Gupta era. And in South India, the Alavar Nayanars who were important now became almost deified in the temples by Chola kings. And Cholas were contemporary of Nathamuni, Yamunacharya, Ramanujacharya. The famous story of Kulottunga II and Ramanuj. The famous story, Ramanujacharya has been in discussion for last 2 years now. So you know these people. In the case of education also, Nalanda University was founded by one of the Gupta kings, Kumar Gupta, and or Shakraditya as they call him. And here you have Vedic colleges, Veda Pathashalas, Enniyaram and others, and many Agraharas with land grant education. So all these things you can format in a tabular format. Although it might not be very easy, all the examples are not required. You can take one example from each and move on. And it's completely fine. And in conclusion, you can talk about the very idea of heritage, something we inherit, something of the past which we were proud of, which shapes our identity even today, who we are. Gupta Empire has been very helpful in the creation of Indian nationalism during freedom struggle. To gain the confidence that we had achieved greatness once, we can do it again. Same thing about Chola Empire defines the very DNA of Tamil identity today. The movie is coming. Ponniyin Selvan first, the very famous author Kalki, on his novel, Maniratnam is making that movie. It will come in some months. But anyway, come to the final question. And it was a googly question, I must agree. Discuss the significance of lion and bull figures in Indian mythology, art, and architecture. The first point, Do not go on mechanistic division of keywords and do not create three parts of the answer, that is mythology, art, and architecture. The better way is to divide into bull and lion separately. That is more rational and that gives you more scope of writing answer. Focus on mythology, and whenever mythology is there, it can be expressed through literature, through sculpture, through painting. So that becomes art and architecture. So you have to not divide it into mythology, art, and architecture. Now, this question was expected in other way. Now, nobody would say that I did not. Everybody will say question to आना ही था, because of the controversy that happened over Central Vista, the Parliament. That is fine. Look at the answer. In the answer, what I have done, I have taken bull and lion and again formed a table. And in this table, we have the various mythological aspects from era to era connected to religion. You have nature worship, strength and virality, Vedic religion, Puranic Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. And let us see how bull and lion are expressed in them. If you go to bull, you have it getting represented in Bhimbetka, in Indus Valley seals and sculptures, etc. The humped bull, especially, humpless and humped both, but humped bull especially, that talks about the nature worship, strength, and virality. Bull has been the symbol of that. We do not have any equivalence for lion in that era, so it is fine. Come to Vedic religion. It has had the astronomic significance, nakshatra, zodiac sign, etc. We have symbols of virality and fertility. Indra is often praised as bull, while Agni and Rudra are compared with lion. But I am sure that it is difficult to talk of Vedic religion in the context of bull and lion in exam. So even if you do not mention this point, it is fine. Come to Puranic Hinduism. In the Gupta and Chalukyan era, gradually you see Hindu caves coming up, and in Hindu caves we have Nandi in front of Shiva. Nandi as a Vahan. So you have important. In the case of lion, you have multiple examples. You have Durga's Vahan as lion, Sherovalima. You also have Narasimha avatar of Vishnu, half lion, half human, theriomorphic form and anthropomorphic form put together. You also have Yali or Vyali, as they call it, which are creatures, a very fearsome, ferocious mythological creatures on temple walls and temple ceilings to cast away the evil spirits. So that is about this. This is also lion. Then you come to Buddhism. This is what you would have written in the class. Also, I generally every teacher talks about it, not only me. That when Buddha was born, in the sky there was a Taurus or Vrishaba Nakshatra. So therefore, Buddha is represented as Vrishab, which indicates Buddha's birth. And in case of Ashoka, you have Rampurva capital, which is today there in Rashtrapati Bhavan at the very entry. In the Rashtrapati Bhavan, you have Rampurva bull capital. And Sanchi and Sarnath abacus have four animals, of which one is bull. Here we have Buddha as a Shakya Simha, the lion of Shakyas. So lion also is a representation of Buddha. And you have Ashokan pillar, many lions in the heraldic position. They are standing. Sanchi, Sarnath, Rampurva, Lauria, Nandangad, Vaishali, everywhere innumerable lions. In Jainism, the first Tirthankara, Rishabhadev, is symbolized through bull. Rishabha has come from Vrishab, that means bull. And 24th Tirthankar, Mahavir, is symbolized through lion. So in paintings, in sculpture of Jainism, you use these symbols of representing the various Tirthankaras. So bull and lion are representation symbols of Rishabdev and Mahavir. Now, this is mythology, and in that, here you can talk about the pillars, sculptures, paintings, and whatnot, temple architecture. That makes your answer complete. So, mythology is there, and we have associated art and culture also. There is one other aspect of it also, but before going to that, let me give you some critical approach. How to think about this. The very purpose of mythology But the very purpose of question is again a dichotomy. The way we discussed in the first question, temple sculpture and society. Here also you have mythology and art architecture that represents that mythology. So art architecture are generally visual representations of mythology. Therefore, the mythological stories, symbols, narratives get represented into art and culture. That is a good introduction line. You also have animals represent a thought, a characteristic, and an emotion. So each bull and lion are supposed to represent something. Like lion represents royal characteristics of fearlessness. A bull represents strength. So they represent some thought, some characteristic, some emotion. Thus, they have been used in literature, sculpture, and painting in metaphorical way. And a very important idea that we discuss when we discuss generally Mauryan era or post-Mauryan era, it is very specific to India that the symbols in India are shared. Every symbol does no symbol has single meaning. Every symbol has multiple meanings. So same bull or lion, let us say Ashokan pillar is there. There is a lion on Ashokan pillar. I go there as a Hindu. I see, acha, lion means this and that. I go there as a Buddhist. I think Buddhist in lion. I go to it's a Jain. I see lion as Jain. So these symbols have multiple meanings. Same symbols are shared by multiple religions. There is no strict boundary that separates symbol in this religion from that religion. The shared space, shared symbolism, shared meaning, unity in diversity. And that makes Indic religions very flexible and intersecting. So multiple meanings of one symbol shared between religions, India's religious specialty of unity and diversity, no strict boundaries, national emblem also. It is open to multiple interpretations. So people from diverse backgrounds can equally get attracted towards a one common thing that unites them. But it is again, I guess it is a difficult line to write in exam hall. But in future, if you get any question about such kind of interpretation of symbols, because in the past also UPSC has asked a few questions on such kind of thing, rock cut, Buddhist motifs, etc. So we see that this theme of representation and interpretation of art has been repeating itself again and again in every second, third year. It's an important line to understand, which can be used in multiple ways. Now, not only religious mythologies, we also have royal mythologies. Bull and lion, especially lion represents many regal characteristics. Not only in India, if you go to Egypt, pharaohs use lion. In Achaemenid Empire in Iran, the old Persian Empire, again, lion symbolized the kingship. So did in India. So here we have other kind of answer. The first answer was done. Now in the second answer, what I can do is I can divide the main body into two parts, religious and royal. So the first part would remain the same as discussed above. In the second part, we add some other facts. For example, Simhasan, the lion throne, becomes very popular, especially after Mahabharat era in our literature, that represents the characteristics of king. We have Samudragupta, who goes for lion slayer coins. So on the coins of Samudragupta, he is shown as killing a lion. You have Kesari, Gaja Kesari, Swayameva Mrigendrata. Mrigendra is lion. So these titles are used by many kings. Even Krishna is called Kausari Sansara Gaja Kesari. He Kamsa Ari is enemy, the enemy of Kans, and Samsara Gaja Kesari, the elephant of samsara, is being killed by the one, that is Krishna. So anyway, mythology again, various kings use titles. Narakesari was used by the founder of Chola Empire, Vijayalaya Chola. We have Raya Gaja Kesari used by a female king queen of Kakatiya called Rudramma Devi. You have Kesari dynasty in Odisha, one of the founders of Bhuvaneshwara. He came from Keshari, or they are also known as Somavamshi kings. They are also known as Keshari kings. You also have cases newspaper by Tilak, quality of fearlessness. On the coins of Satvahana, Shakas, etc., bull and lion are found. Royal emblem, the Pallavas royal emblem was again of lion. Kings who ruled India had lion as suffix. Singh is a surname used by Rajputs and Punjabi Sikhs. Again, that shows some characteristic. Singh, lion. So if you end up using such kind of royal aspect also, it is not mandatory. Even without going for royal mythology, if your answer consists only of religious mythology, that answer is still a complete answer, no problem. It can be concluded with some kind of shared symbolism or other things, which is completely fine. But if you add royal analogies also, then you can have another conclusion which is more suitable in this context. This conclusion is given by Upinder Singh in her book Political Violence, a fantastic book. He tells it is difficult to state whether lion and other animals like elephant, etc., symbolism found its way into political domain from religious arena or vice versa. But the simultaneous importance of these animals in both domains, religious and political, is striking. This is another way of conclusion. So this is how I would conclude the discussion also. 6 questions, 3 culture, 3 modern. My whole attempt has been to open up your mind, to give you an idea of multiple possibilities of writing the introduction, structuring the content, concluding the answer. There is no model answer. There is no model answer. It's a myth. You can take the same answer from factual level to conceptual level also with the help of some kind of critical thinking. And the critical thinking, critical approach is not difficult. It is very well hidden inside the question. You just have to deconstruct the question, and the analysis is opened in front of you. Anyway, thank you.